Hey guys. Yes. No. Actually, would be a better.
Think about well, no, not when you're coaching.
All right. We're going because we're feeling the same as you are feeling. Like, okay, this is good, but I'm ready for it to be over, and it's like all the time. And we got one more meeting. We also have other things that are coming up on our schedule, and so she's leaving at 5, and y'all are leaving at 6.
I'm leaving at 5:30.
She's leaving at 5:30, and y'all are leaving. That's Chachula, which my schedule for everybody is leaving at 6.
But let me add that caveat that what we're teaching is going to be pretty intense. How do you use Refocus? How many of you already use Refocus? Oh.
Never heard
Really?
of it?
No, you come to five people and do your work here. Come Refocus.
But a lot of people don't know how to do it right, and therefore it gets misused, and then it loses its effectiveness when you send the same kid up, or actually more than one kid, multiple times for talking or for squeaking their chair. Admin checks out. They're like, this person's a frequent, I don't remember what frequent referrer or something like that. And you get this kid, and the teacher really hasn't done everything they can. And admin is going to dismiss that as futile. They're going to send them back. And then you're ticked because they brought them back, but you haven't done everything that could potentially be done to prevent that.
So real quick, how many of you used the PAT in the last couple of weeks? How did it go?
It was great. They loved it.
Good.
They were really into the point system and all that stuff.
Fantastic. Anyway, how did it go with classes?
Really well too, because they're more quieter, more focused. And like you said, they're blaming each other if they're not focused.
Good, good. Somebody else have their hands up. PATs.
Yeah.
Well, they're holding each other accountable a lot more. Where before I think they would hype each other up, and now it's having like the opposite effect. So they're like, shh, quiet.
Yeah, but tell them you have high school kids.
Oh yeah, I have high school kids, and I'm using happy faces and smiley faces, and it's working.
Nice.
They are really invested in happy faces and smiley faces.
Good. Who else? I see someone over here.
Mine take forever to transition and get materials out, so it really helped with that with the bonus.
Nice.
So we
Perfect.
were like, hurry up! Like, it was great.
Good, 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 good. All right, now, that's part of the carrot. We're going to talk about the stick tonight. But you see how it would be really easy to take that PAT piece out of this system and only use that to throw everything else that we've been talking about away. It works. But it only really works long term if we're using proximity, if we have our face in the right way, if we are genuinely building a relationship with kids and they understand we care about them, if we're ready for them, if they feel safe. All of these things come together. This is kind of like the last 10% to get you to 98% cooperation. How much cooperation do you need from your kids? How much? You need 100% cooperation. How long do you need it for? 100% of the time. You need 100% cooperation 100% of the time. And that's why we've been layering all of these things. And here we are at session 8 and 9, finally giving you, oh, I could really use this, it's going to work well. But we wanted you to really master the other modules before we got to accountability and motivation. So you're talking about, I'm hearing my students are a little bit more motivated to get on task. Great. What if they aren't? What do you do, particularly with a kid or two that's either having a bad day or a bad week or they're constantly off task? How do you deal with it? Because it's expensive to take kids and send them to the office, right? When they're in the office, do you have to write something up to send somebody to our office? So that's time out of your schedule. Are they getting what they want out of education? They're getting out of your class?
No.
They want out, right? They don't want to pay attention, they want to screw around, they're getting out. Okay? So they're missing out on your instruction. Does it disrupt the other kids when you have to call or send a kid out? And what's happening in the office with your kiddo? They're sitting there with a credentialed teacher that's monitoring them? No, security or an admin assistant, right? And then your administrator, maybe they're having a bad day or they're overwhelmed, and they meet with your student and say, okay, Mijo, don't do it again, and send them back to class. How do you feel about that? Dad, come, they're not supporting you. All right, so we're thinking realistically that if you put a whole system in place, that you're sending a kid to the office maybe 2 or 3 times a year. At most, 2 or 3 times a year. The rest of the time, you're dealing with it. And I'll go back to what I told you the first time. The standards in your classroom are whatever you allow the students to get away from. Okay? Is that just like a Casper the Friendly Ghost up there?
It's on lock, right?
Yeah.
Did you hear the steps? Somebody walk
No.
around?
I have to do it, I just don't think anybody's there.
Oh, better go home and find it.
Yes?
Pizza, I wish. It's just saying, there's no storage.
All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, and she's going to talk about refocus.
Okay, so for those of you that know Refocus, or have heard of it, I think it's probably the misunderstood and mistaught or used device. And if it's done right, it's great. But if it's done horribly, and believe me, I've been in a lot of classrooms, none of yours, where there were some people that, I mean, this kid like was leaning in his chair, and the guy goes, "Go to Refocus," and I'm like. And then by that time, by the third time a kid's either rocked in his chair or talked back, he's so angry, he completely lost his cool. He, or she, I won't be specific. But, you know, and the teachers that have allowed it to get that far are going to have a hard time pulling it back and trying to get this implemented. However, it can be done if you've been laying the groundwork as we've been going. And learning how to just kind of stand over a kid, make them uncomfortable. You know, use the diffusers when they say something like, "This is stupid," and you're like, "That may be, but we're still going to do it." You know, using all those tools, and we'll talk about them in a minute. We're at accountability and motivation. This is Marzano. I think I've read it to you guys before. Effective teaching and learning cannot take place in a poorly managed classroom. If students are disorderly and disrespectful, and no apparent rules or procedures guide behavior, chaos becomes the norm. In these situations, both the teachers and students suffer. We all know that. If you're a ping pong ball, and you're bouncing, you're not going to be very effective in trying to get your goals accomplished, because basically they're playing you like a fool. They're bouncing you around, and you're never going to have time to get to the curriculum, which is exactly what they want it to happen, right? If they're in a classroom where they're not being respectful or feeling respected, that's going to happen. There was a teacher a year or so back. I literally walked into her classroom, sat in the back, and I could not believe what was going on. Like, there were kids up there. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I was sitting in the back, and it was killing me. Oh, it was killing me. And she had to walk out. She walked out with a student with a class full of 38 and went outside, and I said, as she's walking, I said, "Can I talk to them for a second?" And she's like, "Yeah." And the minute I walked up to the front of the class, the kids sat up. And I'm like, "I want to talk to you guys about something." And I said, "You know, well, they said she sucks." And I'm like, "Do you realize you're responsible for your learning, whether you like the teacher or not? Like, next year, you're going to be held accountable for what's been going on in here. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not paying attention, or if you're unable to pay attention because the room's out of, you're still responsible for that information. So why don't you shut your mouths and get in your books? Or get busy on the project, or whatever the heck was going on." And they were like, well, we don't like her, why don't you be our teacher? I'm like, hey, that's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you, you need to, you are responsible. Well, it didn't matter. They ended up running her out. But, and because it had already gotten so bad, it didn't matter what anybody said. It didn't matter. We've already talked about that. Reminder, first thing, kids sitting here tapping, the first thing that goes through your mind is the 3 questions. Is he or she disrupting me, the students, or themselves? Some kids learn better doing the tapping. And if they're not bothering anybody, what's the point in addressing it? If you can't continue to teach because, you can hear a clock tick and it drives you crazy, then yes, address it. That's your discretion. Those should be the first thing that come through your mind before you lose your cool. And this is coming from someone with a horrid temper. I wish I did this more around the house. And the quote about Marzano and chaos, I'll give you a perfect example. We have 8 dogs inside and 54 animals outside. And I don't have to deal with the ranch animals very often. Thank you, God. But I'm home more often than anybody else. And we brought in a new puppy, and she was not my idea. And she was, the 3 breeds are the most hyper, Kelpie, McNab, and Border. She's a mix. And she's skinny, and she literally can hit the ceiling when she jumps. And of course I'm stuck taking care of this monster. Well, she has set off our entire house dynamics. Like, she's not mean, but the other dogs get mean because she's so hyper and she annoys them. And I think about that in the case of a classroom. Because by the time I'm done with 4 hours at home with her and them, I am so angry I can literally pop my lid. And to top things off, then if she gets away from me and goes and chases the chickens, or chases the goats, or goes after our pigs, or the best was yesterday, before I gave her away, she went after our $1,000 lamb, show lamb. And she doesn't mean to hurt him, but she'll snip at the face. Well, a scar on something like that is going to ruin it. So I'm freaking out. I have nobody home to help me. And let me tell you, by the time yesterday was over, I was done. So think about the kid who is a control freak, and I'm not, but let me just say, the control freak, or the one that can't function in a chaotic classroom. Anybody can function in a quiet classroom. But there are kids that can't function in a crazy classroom where you don't have control. They need to know that you have control. And I was sitting there losing at home, thinking this is just like a classroom out of control. For a teacher and for the kid who is sitting there trying to learn. And I gave her away. You can't give a kid away, but, well, in some cases you can. You can. So you've gone through everything that you are comfortable doing. Proximity, pacing, red zones. You've set up your classroom to be the most effective it can be. It's comfortable, it's safe. You've developed a rapport with your kids, at least most of them, maybe not all. And you're ready to go. And you've still got a kid that says, F you. Okay, I don't know about you, but if this kid, most kids don't just all of a sudden stand up and say, F you. There's something that precipitated it. Either a kid, you could tell they were just being a jerk and maybe disrespectful to you. You ask a question, they go, yeah, whatever. You knew it was coming, right? Most of the time you're going to know it's coming. So if that's the case, or you've read the body language between 2 kids, you know it's about to explode, you have to do something. And if you didn't intervene sooner than the explosion, it's going to get ugly. So intervene. Don't let it go. Don't let a kid over here that you can tell is pissed off at the world, don't let them control your classroom. And the best way to do that is while you're talking, while you're lecturing, and then you have the kids do something where their heads are down, you walk over and you just go, are you okay? Sometimes that's all it takes. If the kid goes, no, I'm not okay, what's up, blah, or, Bethel over there pissed me off, and Johnny over here is a jerk, and the kid's obviously agitated. So you're going to have to come up with a plan. But you can't tell me that then when the kid goes, well, F you never saw it coming. That's where refocus comes in. These are the underlying premise. It's supposed to eliminate repeated warnings. I was the one that said, page 13, page 13, page 13. Miss Taylor, what page? Page 13. And by the time the 5th kid asked it, I was already ticked off. And I'm like, are you deaf? Of course, that's not the appropriate thing to say. And, you know, you can't say, are you stupid? Because that's really not appropriate. So the best thing to do is write it, don't repeat. If a kid asks, you point and you keep going. And then the other one was, I hated to get mad at kids, so I'd be like, hey, can you guys be quiet? Hey, that's enough, okay? Hey, can y'all be quiet? Look, you're really making me mad, can you shut up? And then it keeps going until I have lost it. Okay, I was guilty of that, and when I learned about this, I'm like, why wasn't this here when I taught? The other thing is, if you're being the class clown and you've just pushed me, I've tried everything, you're just bouncy. And I say, go to refocus. Okay, at that moment, first couple times you do it, the kids are all going to be, oh, dude, oh, she's pissed. Yeah, I am, but you're going to stay calm. Go to refocus. And the kid says, I'm not going. I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to go over there. Okay, if they are openly defiant, that's when you send them out. But you don't send them out for something, if you can deal with that, deal with it. Most kids aren't going to say, I'm not going. They're going to be just embarrassed enough to get over there. It allows you to retain behavioral momentum. You still have control. You're not giving up the control. And you don't let it escalate. I think we mentioned it early on that they want to get you to the point where you're losing your cool. And we talk about the steps. You know, they might egg you a little bit, then it gets a little worse, then it gets much worse, and then it gets to where you blow your hat, you know, you've lost it. Well, they won. That's when they've won. So you don't want to let it go like that. And the other thing is, and it was what Steve talked about, the Queen Victoria face, staying calm. That's hard to do. But if you have a system in your head and you keep going to it, eventually you will be calmer and they will respond well. And this coming from someone that I'm never calm. So when to refocus? You don't do it as a first act of discipline at all. In fact, it'd be great if at most one kid had to visit a day, period. In the beginning, that's not going to be the case. They're going to test you. They're going to test you. That same kid may test you 3 times, and you may be like, oh my God, shut up. But the reality is, you do it every time. If they've already visited refocus, and they come back and they start talking and this doesn't stop them, hey, I need you to stop. At that point, you've already disciplined him once. If he does it again, is that really a send-outable offense? That's not really a word, but is that really one where you want to evict the kid because they're just not talking?
No.
Isn't the goal that we want them to learn, right? I mean, ultimately, even though I didn't think I was teaching the right stuff, I thought what I was teaching was pretty important, and I didn't want these kids either heading to the office and all of a sudden ending up out at PE, which my kids were famous for, or, you know, as soon as they leave your classroom, you've lost control, and you've lost control of his learning or her learning. And I think that's the biggest disappointment. Because like Steve said, you know where they go. They go sit in the office, and it's complete wasted time. Whereas even if they're sitting in refocus in your classroom, they're hearing what's going on. Unless they miraculously have those stupid earbuds in. And yes, my kid has them. She got them for Christmas, the ones without the cords. Mm-hmm. Oh, honey, let me tell you. She gets in the car and I'll say, hey, how's your day? Hey, how's your day? Do you have your earplugs in? Oh, what? Yeah, forget it. I don't care how you do it. So refocus. You make sure that you've done all the proactive. Make sure your room's set up appropriately where you can be a threat in a good way. I guess I should say instead of a threat, so that you can reach your zones and keep the reds down to a minimum. If you're moving, you're going to do that. I know I've been in a couple classrooms and I think I've recommended, I mean I've been in more than a couple, but there's a couple where I've said, don't teach just from the front like I'm doing right now. Okay, move around. Because I was in one class and it was over here, I've actually been in several, where the teacher was talking and the lesson was bomb. And the kids were semi-engaged, but as soon as she walked this way, they went. And they were the same ones, of course, that want all the attention. That, you know, I have a question, can you help me write my name? You know, all that stuff, and you're like, really? You're just wanting to drain me. And I think that's probably happened in 95% of the classroom I've been in. And I think it's just nature. That's our nature. So it has to be something that we make ourselves do. And it's got to be a habit. You have to change your habits. And what do they say? 10 weeks? 6 weeks to change a habit? You have to consciously do it. And value what you teach. You don't want your kids wasting their time. They're not learning anything. And ultimately, as teachers, that's our job. Only you dismiss the child from refocus. And we'll talk about that. In other words, they don't bounce when they feel like they're done. That's your control. And then it's less labor intensive, whatever, for you. I mean, like we were talking about, you guys all have discipline, like step process? Yes? Okay, so for me, I never used them because I was too lazy to go get the step form. The other thing was, we didn't call home for like the third step. At that point, the kid has done ticked me off, and you know I'm ready to have him in a corner where the only thing I can talk to is me. But so with the step, I mean, how does this tie in? Kind of does. You do all the pre-stuff, and the kid keeps going. If you send them to refocus for something low level, okay, then that's step one. I don't know, do you guys have to call home on the first one? You guys know? It's probably the second or the third. We'll talk about what I think and what I think we have all decided that is probably the best. And if you follow this, admin will know that you have done everything in your power, and when you do send a kid out, they need to know you're serious. And that's the only time you would stop class to write a referral or write anything on this form, is if you had to send them out for being, you know, horribly offensive, physically threatening, whatever the situation is. Obviously, that's an immediate just goodbye. But if you've gone through all of this and the kid still is being a pain, you have not stopped teaching that whole time. You have not lost 1 minute on discipline right now. And the kid goes there. You'll find out that this will pay off in the end. The first couple times is going to be very, on the front end, very heavy. Before you get ticked off at a kid, consider this. Is your learning environment conducive to good behavior? Or is there something in your room that maybe is setting the kid off or making them uneasy, whatever? Are you contributing? I know there were days where it was my fault. It was definitely my fault. I didn't feel good, I was grumpy, I barked at a kid that I never should have barked at, and then when he barked back at me, I was too angry to not, you know, to ignore it, and so it was blah, blah, blah. Is your room learner friendly? Can you get to everyone? Are you 2 seats away? Do you have an interior loop to make sure that your zones are tight? And have you covered this behavior in a teach to? You can't get mad at a kid for jumping up and going to sharpen this pencil if you didn't tell them and teach them what the process was in the first place. If you're going to be loosey-goosey, they're going to be loosey-goosey. And you know if there's a hole in it, they're going to find it. They're going to say, well, you didn't tell us that we couldn't get up. And I don't know about you, but I can't remember anything. So when they say, Miss Taylor, you didn't say it, I'm like, that might be true. Seems like I did, but that doesn't always work. And this is the process. You've used your diffusers. You've used your verbal prompts, such as, I need you to get to work. Never ask them, and no would ever plead. When you walk over, you say, I need you two to get focused and stop talking. You don't need to be mean, but you need to be forward. Don't say, could you please stop talking? Which is what I said all the time. what am I gonna do if they say no? So don't leave it for a choice, don't leave a choice. You know, say, do it. The slow turn, the Queen Victoria, you know, what was his name? When you're like this?
Larry.
Just a minute, Larry. Then you do the whole turn. That's when you're teaching or the kids are doing work and they're just not staying. Then you give the cold stare. You do the slow turn, right? Maybe don't wear the best deodorant that day. Proximity, same thing. You're right there. Sometimes you don't say a word. You just stand. And they'll self-correct. They don't self-correct. And you try something else like, I need you to do this right now. And you must have tried all or some. You're going to find that, just like everything, you're going to have some you're more comfortable with than others. If you have a kid that is a consistent problem, though, you might want to consider hitting all of them and see if any of them work. Even the ones that are outside of your comfort zone or your toolbox. So you've exhausted your toolbox of the fun stuff, where you get to kind of put them on their heels. Tell a kid, go to refocus, please. Oh, actually, don't say please. I'm from the South. I say that all the time. You'll say, I need you to go to refocus. This isn't a perfect world. You will already have had an area set up. It needs to be titled refocus, and it needs to have only the forms and something to write with. And I don't know if the writing with might be a problem in some schools because the kids might use it as weapons and, you know, things. But if you have, maybe they can check it out. I don't know, whatever. If they have to have their own, then that'd be part of it, wouldn't it? Take your own pencil or pen. I mean, if they're becoming prepared, then that's part of it. Student will ideally take the most direct route and the quietest route in your mind. That is something you cover and teach to. Like in this case, if we had a refocus back there behind Steve, and a kid over here is misbehaving, I would tell them I want you to go that way and straight across, or if I'm not comfortable with them because they might go like this all the way down the bookcase or stick their pot in there, then you might want to tell them right down the middle of the room where you can keep an eye on them. Whatever you teach is what they need to do. Student will fill out the refocus form. Again, perfect world. They're sitting there, they're filling it out, they don't ask any questions because you've already covered it in a teach to. And when the form is completed, this is where most of the teachers that I've seen really struggle. The kid is supposed to sit there and wait. And when you have time, when like you say, okay, why don't you guys work on number 1, and while everybody's got their heads down working, you walk over there, take a second, and look. Or, if you don't have time for that, they can sit there the whole class. It's better than sending them out, because they have to hear at least what you're saying. So, while they're sitting there, I'm done. I'm not supposed to turn around and hit Billy. I'm not supposed to go, Miss Taylor, I'm done. Miss Taylor, I'm done. Ugh. Miss Taylor. Because they want to get back to what they were doing. Don't let them. Yeah, that's where you go, you know, you kind of give that look. They're going to know because you've already told them. You go to refocus, you sit there. You fill out that form, and I will come to you when I am ready. You practice it. When you go to check it, it needs to be to your satisfaction. And we're going to talk about the form in depth later. But you need to make sure, I have read some of them when I've gone into classrooms. And it says, what did I do wrong? I was talking. How am I going to fix this? Not talking. Would you do this again? No. Please. Please. And then they're going to start getting creative and saying things you don't want to hear. So if it's not appropriate, you hand it back and you say, I'll be back in 5. You need to finish this. And then if they still don't finish it, they can sit there all day. Now, let's say the kid ideally fills it out, it looks decent, you're like, okay. They're going to go back to their desk, and in their head they're thinking, well, I've already been sent to refocus, so the next thing is she's going to kick me out of class, right? Of course, I'm talking about my class, I'm not trying to be sexist, I'm acting like it's my class. So, he's gone back to his desk, starts doing something different. Okay, yeah, he's doing it to get to me at this point, or somebody, maybe a little girl that he wants to be friends with, whatever. And you say it again. I need you to go to refocus. Let's do this again. This is so dumb. Obviously it's not working. Okay, go sit down. Go back to refocus. Now, if it escalates from there and they become violent or horribly belligerent, that's a boo-boo. But if he's just going, oh, this is stupid, okay, go ahead. I don't care if you have to send him 3-4 times, unless it becomes, if it escalates, at some point you may have to. But ideally, you would have nipped it somewhere in the first 2 when they realize, I gotta do this again. Now, if they're only saying, I was talking, I'll stop talking, that's not such a big deal to write in a form 800 times. Especially if the kids are writing an essay. And I had my choice, I'd go write 2 words too. So I kind of came up with something on my own that we'll talk about. It's still the same form, but I thought you need to do something that is somewhat, especially for the junior high and older, elementary, you guys could probably come up with something similar. I told them, there's a section, and you'll see it later, pick a quote, and I have a list of quotes on the back. And they all have to do with character, being caring, you know, character building stuff like the pillars. And I think they should have to look at a quote and discuss how that pertains to what they did and why that's inappropriate. And I think by making them do more writing and being a little more introspective, because at that point you look at their paragraph and you go, 1 sentence isn't going to do. You know, you give me 3 to 5. What? That's fine. You can sit there all day. You're not getting out till you do. And put the onus on them. Make something, and come up with something else if you can. But I think by making them read a quote and have to synthesize how that is appropriate in their situation, that's a pain in the butt. And then if they get it a second time and you tell them, by the way, it can't be the same quote, eventually that's going to get old. Oh, wait, I didn't. And then if you are satisfied, like if she was in my, I'd say, are you ready? I'm okay with this form. Are you ready to rejoin the class? And the kid has to say yes. And then you say, okay, we're on page 53. Get busy. And you make them, and you do this when you have time, not when the kid says. This is kind of a rapid, yes ma'am?
It's not called refocus, but there's a desk by the door for one of my periods. And now, like, I don't even tell him this. Like, the other kids will, like, go to the door. Like, he'll do something, and the whole class or kids next to him will, like, go to the door. Because, like, they already know. So I don't know if, like, that's appropriate or not, that, like, they are called, or if that's, like, something that's just innate.
Well, you have high school kids, and
Yeah.
they've been in your class, and you have a great rapport with the kids. We talked a little bit about tightening up a little bit, and I think if you name that refocus, not just for him, and then whoever, you don't want them chanting, but they're going to start looking at each other like, is she going to do something? And then that's when you just say, I need you to go. Now, you know, with him, you're still going to get the cat calls because that's already been set. But if you send somebody else, it's still the same purpose, right? And now, oh, she's serious. Like, she's not just going to screw with him. She's going to make sure we're all. And I think that's where that tightening would be good. And so, yeah, you've already set the premise of a special area. So that's good. Now you're just taking it to the next step. So you've already created an area. It will be removed as possible. Some of you that are wall to wall, it's a little tough, so you have them turn their back at a table or something along the lines. You have a supply of the things you need, and that area will only be for refocus. Because I'll tell you, if you have something else for me to read, I'll be reading it. I'll be doing anything else but what I'm supposed to be doing if you have distractions in that area. And of course, you will have covered this in a Teach 2. And then step 2, students filling out the refocus. Make them fill it out completely. Date, name, everything. Be a stickler, because how you handle this stuff is going to permeate your lessons, your teaching level, all of those things. They're supposed to answer with thoughtful responses. I can tell you in all the ones I read, they weren't. And at this point, you don't stop. The kids are doing a problem, they're 5-a-days, whatever. Say a kid got in trouble walking in, and I might walk over to my refocus and I'll look at it. I'm, okay, are you ready to rejoin the class? We're on page 2. And then I take that form. If you're like me, I'll lose it. So I would have a place on my desk that I sit at. And then when in between classes, when I have my 5-10 minutes, whatever my passing period is, I can read it over. And I can either decide, do I think I made my point with this kid, or is this a call home? Frequent flyers, I would automatically call home after school. And you know, you call the biggest butthead in your class's parents, everybody hears about it. And if you call the biggest butthead's parents and you called to say something good because they had a good day, let me tell you, that permeates even faster. Because the parent's like, why are you calling me? Well, I just wanted to tell you, he actually had a really good day and I wanted to thank you and let you know so that you could give him some props. You know, the parent goes like this. They don't get those calls ever. So I would say your worst kid, if they have a good day, make an effort to call home. Don't always be making those negative calls where they blame it on you. Well, maybe you need to have a better system. Maybe you this. So they fill it out, make sure it's thoughtful, and then you tell them to go back to class, back to what we're doing, whatever page we're on, and you don't stop teaching. The kids are now looking up, and you're back in front of them ready to go. Again, we talked about that. No hooping and hollering, no horse shack. Don't call my name. I will come to you when I'm ready. You teach that in a teach to, and the first kid that does it, you show it. You're like, no. I'll be there in a minute. I mean, no kid is going to want to be one-upped by their teacher. Again, this must be part of the teach to. You're going to see a theme with this. When they walk back to their seat, they cannot decide to stop and visit every girl along the way, or every boy along the way, or act like they're getting a pencil, and then you go, I'm sorry, I told you to go straight to your straight to your seat. Miss Taylor, I need to get a pencil. No. I think you need to go refocus again. You know, that's so gay. Okay, maybe so. Go ahead. You're still going to write you're still going to do the paper. If they don't complete any of them, so the kid sits there, let's say they had to sit there for 15 minutes because you were talking. When you finally get over there and they've answered, I was talking, not talk. And you look at that. It's okay to say, you know what, get another form. Fill this out right. Or we'll keep doing it till you get it right. That's all right. Let's keep doing it. Or if on the way back they decide to do that, you have them revisit. However you implement this is how they're going to react and either rise to the challenge or fold under your control. And that's really perfect. Frequent flyers. If you know your room is conducive, you know that you didn't set this kid off in some weird way, and if you know that you've done what you can as far as proximity and all of this, then you resort to the refocus. Repeat offenders, if they have to go 3-4 times in a day, okay, because while he may not be learning the lesson, you can bet all 38 that's sitting there watching are, and you may end up having to deal with him on a whole nother level, but those 38 kids are all watching how you handle him. Somebody have a question? And again, I'm not saying keep a kid in your room who's violent, confrontational, a threat, gangbanging, whatever. You know how they have those stupid cat calls they do and all that? Yeah? No? You guys have heard it, right? So, I mean, if you have somebody in class doing that, that needs to be something, if your administration is pretty hard on that, probably need to leave because they're probably calling for some kind of action or being a wannabe. Either way, you don't want that in your classroom. But if you can address it quickly on the first or second time, you can probably squash it. Documentation for this is not to interrupt your teaching. It is not. They are doing the paperwork. After class, you sit down with that form and you can take whatever notes you need on there. Documentation right there. But it's not interrupting your class. So you write it down and now you have it. You have it for when that time where the kid has just really pushed it to the top and you're done. If you ever have to send this kid to the office, you've got not only the refocus forms that the kid has filled out, but if you had to send them out for referrals or steps, you still have all that paperwork. There is no parent or administrator who is going to say, you didn't cover your butt. And I mean, for some of you, you probably haven't run into that a lot, but some of the older ones will understand that we've had too many sent back saying, we didn't explain the situation. What did you do? Did you call the parent? Did you have a one-on-one meeting with this child? Well, you're going to have all that. And it will not have interrupted your teaching until you get, or unless you had to get to a referral point. And at that point, you're probably perfectly fine sitting down and writing a referral real quick, because you're probably done with the kid. Decide if it warrants a phone call home. I think repeat offenders, you should call them all the time. And I don't mean always calling to be the bad news bears. I think you need to call if you have a good day. We all know those kids that we can name on our one hand of every class that is a pain in the butt. And if you know who they are, this is where repeat offenders and all that, you know who they are. So do everything you can to reach out to that kid. But I would call home when they really have, if you're like, oh my God, I haven't had to yell at him once today. Seriously, a parent that has heard nothing but bad news, it's pretty cool for them to hear that. Even if it's one day, one class, 1 hour. They would love to know that their kid's not always a jerk. The exception, you know. And I don't know what all the school's policies are. If you send a kid out, is it a referral form? No? You guys? It's a referral form, right?
Yes.
Anybody in the elementary levels?
Yeah.
Yeah?
But I don't send kids out.
You what?
I don't send kids out.
Yeah.
I mean, the only time, like, it would be if, like, they physically harm someone. They, like,
Yeah.
hit someone or something like that.
Well, I've been in your classroom too, and yeah. I don't think you would ever need to. I think, I don't even know where my referral forms were. And when I retired, I was going through my stuff and I'm like, oh, there they are. You know, they're bent, they're old, they're not dated right. I mean, they're all messed. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool.
It's all computerized now.
Oh, is it?
It's on computers.
Oh yeah, I know, I don't know about that.
But
I had
If
to
you
write.
don't
We can't just
immediately
send-
do it,
we can't just send our kids out. We can't just say, here, go to the office or go to the security. We have to call security to take them because we're not going to go. They're going to
Oh, no.
hide in the bathrooms.
Yeah, and get in worse trouble?
Yeah.
so if you don't stop and immediately fill it out there,
They won't take 'em.
security will like,
Well, I can't fill it
Let
out
you have it.
immediately because I don't always have access to a computer right in front of me all day long.
Well,
But
and
I can do in between classes. So when we're in the locker room dressing out or whatever, I'll go and write one up.
but what if the kid is horrible?
I
Like
have to keep my phone by me and call security.
for a teacher,
it's
that was
the
part
answer.
that was
No, I
part of
call
the problem.
The security dispatch.
Oh, you need to give me that number.
Are you kidding?
No.
I mean, back in our day, we could send them out, but they started to get worse, where they were like going elsewhere and they'd come back all stoned or whatever. But I mean, and our security was, of course, friends with them. So what good did that do? Yeah, they
I
were
don't-
besties.
I don't call to come and get them very often, but if they're in a fight or something, I have to call somebody to
Right.
get them.
Well, what I wonder is they probably understand PE's plight, but like this is where why I never sent a kid out, because I didn't want to sit down and have to write it. And I think I sent out 2 kids that I didn't remember. And I was so angry at that point, which means that I'd lost my cool, I had not stayed calm, and they lost their cool, and I escalated it. You know, we talked about, don't take the bait. Well, there were some days where I just didn't feel well, and I was short, and a kid could set me off. And there were 2 that I remember, and I was so angry at that point, I was like, you guys need to do something, and I gave them an assignment or something, and I sat down and wrote it real quick. But ideally, you're not going to have to do that frequently. If you do all of this, I think, again, it might be 1 or 2 a semester at the most. Ideally, 1 or 2 a year. Because if you're doing your part, you're always going to have a couple of those kids that are jacknuts. They aren't going to conform. They're not going to be okay. And those are the kids, especially in the beginning of the year, that tend to wean out and end up going elsewhere. But you still need to set the tone for your classroom, regardless of what the kids that are coming into your class, what your composition is irrelevant. You've still got to do your job for your sanity and for the learning part of your classroom. All right, so process, early intervention, that's all the things we talked about. The proximity, the zones, the verbal demands, diffusers, all the tools that you have need to be done first. And then you're like, okay, graceful exit, I need you to go to refocus. If you don't want to bring us, if this is a kid that likes the attention, I would quietly go over and say, why don't you go to refocus right now? Or don't ask them, go to refocus. And because it's not as, if they're a kid that wants attention, don't give it to them. If it's a kid that hates attention, then, yeah.
I feel like in our classes, they would want to go to refocus. They don't have to do the exercise or the activity that we're doing. Because I have a lot of lazy kids.
Well, and that's...
And they'd rather just sit there and write something than to get up and do what they're supposed to do.
Okay, and that brings up a touchy issue because that teacher that was in trouble for sending her kid to another teacher, and then like a buddy system that we have in this, and she sent that kid to another room, and that teacher made her do push-ups. Well, you know, California Ed Code says we can't use necessarily corporal punishment, and it wasn't a PE class. In your case, by the way, everyone was dismissed from that, and no charges were filed. So, but in like PE, you can make them. So let's say the kid says my ankle hurts, my back hurts, whatever. Okay, then you can keep walking. But I would have them do the refocus first, and they think they're done. I would say you have 5 minutes to do this, and then you're giving me however many laps are reasonable. Because even as a fat kid, I wouldn't want to walk. I would hate it. Don't let them walk with their friends. It's not going to be fun. At some point, that's not going to be fun. And if a kid says, I'd rather do this than play, well, some of them are antisocial, so that's fine, keep walking. And the other thing you could do is make a big, kind of not a big joke, but, hey, let's see who's on the mile club. And then kids would get in trouble, and you can say, oh, you haven't gotten up to, how many laps did you get today? Okay, I mean, and that takes, you're taking the power away from the kid. Does that make sense? You're going, you have a chart, and you're like, the kid, the frequent flyer, perhaps, that doesn't like to dress out or do anything. You're like, okay, I understand you don't like to do that, and I'm willing to work with you. But you're going to be giving me laps every day, and you can't walk with your friends. What's your choice?
What do you do, in her situation? You tell them you can't walk with your friends, but they walk with their friends anyways.
See,
You know.
Steve, what would you do?
Or you tell them to give you push-ups and they're not doing them. I'm not doing it. You
You're gonna
can't force them
send
to the ground to do them.
They walk with
Well,
your
part of that is
friends
setting the
before
tone.
I would usually send them in the opposite direction
Principals and directors.
or send them to another area on their own.
So, I don't know. That's something that you'd have to chew on and figure out. Because I don't know what the different rules are. At Central, they would make them walk. At Minarets, whether you're dressed out or not, you walk. So if you don't want to participate, you're walking. And you didn't want to dress out, that's okay.
That's what they want. They want to be sent to walk. They want.
Then you have to find something they don't want to do. I don't know, pick up trials all over campus. I don't know, that's something I'd have to think about.
Make them jump rope.
Graceful exit, refocus. And then graceful entrance. Here's the key to this also. When they come back to their seat, it needs to be quiet and needs to be at your dismissal. If you were to do buddy teachers, which elementary schools can do this, I don't think high schools or junior highs are really, you could do this with the right admin. But from what I've learned, I don't think this could happen right now except for elementary. You have a buddy teacher, and your buddy teacher has a refocus area, and you guys have already agreed that if you have a child who is being horribly disruptive, and you don't think going to refocus in your room is going to work, you can send them to your buddy teacher. Here's where it gets dicey for me, and this is why you couldn't do this with junior high or high school kids, is a younger kid's going to be like, cool, I'm going, or not cool, but they're going to know the teacher, and they're going to walk in there. They have to wait at the door until that teacher acknowledges them and moves them and says you can go to refocus. So it's several steps, and then all this happens, and then they go back to your class. Personally, I still think you're losing the power by sending them out. I would rather deal with it in-house with me. So there is a buddy system, and some of you may be more comfortable with that. Be aware of what that means. And then you welcome them back, clean slate, move on. If it's not a clean slate, you won't be able to keep it cool. My suggestions, I think the kid needs to, I mean, I'm an English teacher, so inevitably I want them to write, but I think the kid needs to think about something more than like what they were doing. Like, if I'm talking to so-and-so, am I trying to hook up with them? Am I just friends? Was I helping them with their homework? Because you know how many times we get in trouble, or we don't get in trouble, we yell at a kid, and they're like, okay, I was just helping, right? And I mean, still kind of harsh sending them to refocus. They're going to tell you that in their thing if they do it right. If you add something for them to consider, like obviously the quote thing would be for kids that are at a higher level reading and writing. Elementary, you could probably give them a happy, sad face and ask them, you know, I don't know, ask them responses. I think visuals are better for the younger kids. And so you could put something together. These are, unless your school has a specific form that you have to follow, you can come up with the one you want as long as it follows some of these main guidelines. I think by doing something like the quotes or something about the character, it serves multi-purposes. It makes it a bit laborious so that it's not so fun. Woo-hoo, I get to go sit over here and act like a jerk. No. The second thing is, it's not a fun time out. If they know they have to write and you could potentially go, that's not enough, I'm sorry. Keep writing. All of a sudden, you're in control and they're not. The kid that sits there and goes, Miss Taylor, Miss Taylor, Miss Taylor, I'm done. God, what are you doing? That kid's got the control. That's why you need to squash that and deal with it right away. And that is not sending them out, because the minute you send them out, again, you've lost control. This is the buddy system. If you have a situation where you want to do that, I'd rather talk about it with you than come up with a plan. I think, again, it's best to have it in home and keep your authority. And then there's going to be a restroom break. Are there any questions so far? Yeah.
The one thing that I do use often, and I don't know if it's right to use it or not, so tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
But and it's bad, it's kind of bad, I feel bad for using it, but I tend to, okay, if you're not going to run, then the whole class is going to run again. And I punish the whole, I don't like punishing the whole class, but it tends to work because they don't like the peer pressure from the other students.
Well, and that's what coaches used to do.
If you're not gonna participate, then the whole class is gonna go outside and we're gonna run the track in the cold or something
And see,
like that.
I mean,
And I
you
hate
could
using
get
that.
in trouble with parents for that. You might get some harassment. But I think because you're a PE teacher, that kind of falls under the realm of the kind of things coaches do. But what about the kid who never gives you any grief?
I know, that's why I feel bad.
I don't know.
It's like those ones ruin it for the whole class, and it's not really fair to the ones who are doing well.
Right.
But I don't know how else to get those other ones. That's the only thing I've come up with that actually motivates them to do something.
Let me talk with Steve and we'll come up, because that's a different situation completely than most.
I was just wondering, in elementary, do they still use like the cards?
They
Like
they
the,
clip up.
no, is it like you can't use those anymore?
You
It's
throw 'em,
public
like, on-
shaming or
They do like a
something?
clip chart.
They clip up or clip down.
What is that?
I do don't do
They have cards with their names. Or no, they have clips with their names. And if they start off like in the middle, and if they do really well, they clip up. And if they do, you might say, I need you to go clip down. It's amazing how that works. Because they
Okay,
do,
so it's like, it's the same idea, only clips instead of
Yeah.
cards.
They're able to
You're
redeem themselves and go back.
Oh, like
on
change your
themselves.
card.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not just you flip your card and you're done forever now.
yeah, you're not screwed like if you get the red card and you're
Yeah.
shamed
No, but that
forever.
was
And you,
awesome.
kindergartners.
I've seen that still use the card system, like where you move it.
Where you get to purple, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're getting out of here.
Yeah.
They're like,
I've
ooh, you're on yellow.
Yeah.
So if this is my last bit for this. It works well if it's done right. And it has to be done right by you following all the steps, having already done your part, and then it's going to take a while to create habit, and if you break habit, then they will break. So you've got to be consistent no matter how hard it can be in the beginning. And you'll find that you're not repeating yourselves anymore. You're not being interrupted by teaching. You're not having to fill out as much paperwork. And you get to spend more time doing what you've written into teaching to do, which is to develop relationships and teach. And being able to say to the one kid who decides to be a punk that day, You know, that's a whole lot easier than, I asked you to be quiet, blah, 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 you're, you know, constantly visiting this kid, meanwhile this kid's going crazy. That's what it eliminates. Any
Well, and then
questions?
I think that the kids, so I think once you've got that under control, your reputation
Yeah.
precedes you, so all the kids know, oh, Miss Taylor, you're not gonna get away with anything in her room. So I
Right.
think kids don't even really try anymore at that point.
They all talk. I mean, they're like a serious network. And that one time you know, some people say, oh, you made an example out of me. Maybe I did. But, you know, in the sense that, you know, you do that to 2 kids and you do it, you're able to squash 2 of their leaders, totally different respect for you. And you do it, what I like about this is at no point do you have to question the kid's integrity. You're not calling them out. You're not embarrassing them in front of their peers. You're also not giving them negative attention. And that's what a lot of them crave. And so you are regaining control of your classroom, and you're doing it on a level that you don't lose your cool, so you're not going home every day exhausted, and the kids don't lose their integrity, because you know the minute that that goes, you've lost a kid. You know, it's all about that respect thing. And if you cut them out at the feet, you're going to have trouble with them the rest of the year. But you teach them with respect, and you can actually get more out of them. And that's not to say that your classes are going to be perfect. There may be somebody, 1 or 2, 5, that are horrible. But I think you'll see out of those 5, you might be able to reduce it down to 2 if this is consistently enforced. And make it harder on them. I don't think that, you know, like what you're saying makes me happy because you can take it to the next level. But like for classroom teachers, you've got to hammer them with, you know, by staying on this. And I really think that by making the refocus form a little bit more insightful, I think you're going to get more out of it. All right, you guys ready for a break? And then Steve will finish. And next, the homework assignments that I put in are, you know, take a picture of your refocus area, take a picture of your refocus form, and then 2 comment reflections by you. And that's really it. And then we'll summarize everything on the last meeting.
So the next meeting is the last one?
We done. And hopefully if the weather kind of subsides at some point, I mean, thankfully we're not in a drought anymore, but I'm not able to get out on my road all the time. So, but what I'm thinking is I'm going to visit 1 classroom a day and spend several hours. So I'll be coming in to different classrooms and just hanging out and watching for a while. What we were trying to do is me going to multiple classrooms, and one of my biggest complaints about admin was, don't come in 15 minutes and think you've seen my class. You know? No. You miss all the good stuff. And I feel like when I walk in, sometimes you guys are like, oh, they're just going to PE, and so I don't really get to spend that quality time. So I'm going to start doing that more that way. And since we're not having these, I have more time. Because I don't have
Veterans starting them.
Oh yeah, I know. But I still have that information already done. I just need to update it. All right, you guys have a good night. I'll tell you where I'm going.
Homework is to share a written response on MCM and whatnot.
On what?
On our class. Share
MCMM is this whole thing. It's this whole
share a
thing.
response on
How well is? You are writing a response as to how you feel the MCMM program as a whole. And then the first one is just refocus. Steve, are you good?
Yep, thank you.
All right, I'll see you. I'll be in touch because we need to talk about for the PE girls. Okay.
Trust me, you have both 4 days.
That would not be good.
Alright, we have 5 minutes here for the restroom.
I have a quick question. So my grader responded back and said that my updates have
I was one of the like before like maybe that specific person. Like, okay, everybody goes, but you need to wait right here. So you jumping jacks before you go in.
That works with some of them. I have some that are just slow. It has one specific, or 2 very specific basically that they just refuse to come to class, refuse to come to roll call, and it's walking around with so busy down there.
Got rid of all of it.
And 60 kids in each student.
Maybe it's behind
It's just like kids everywhere, so it's hard to keep track of everybody. So if they're not in your roll call line, they're absent. And then next thing you know, she's absent.
And then they're not.
They're just wandering around. Yeah, exactly.
Why do you know?
We're here. And so it's like hard to keep track of them, and I have specific ones. One of them just came from Japan this semester. It's just absolutely out of control. She refuses to come to roll call, she refuses to come to class, she refuses to do anything. She won't dress out. And so I just started out in referrals every day.
I'm afraid.
It's like, well, she was in my class, but I saw her out there, so I got her.
He comes to class and he's like, you will not do it. If I modify it, if I do
Is your freshman?
no, he's sophomore, he's been on this. It's like 29 credits.
What's his name?
Oh, that's what, yeah, that's what we're talking about.
You don't have it? No. No, like, he will not do it.
Yeah, there's a boy.
And it's like, I've already called doctors, I've called
Their-
You know what I've
their
noticed?
comment was please refer to the-
I've been emailing counselors, I've been emailing counselors for help, and they have not helped me, and they have not been responding.
Oh,
Hey, I had been trying to call the students at home because she's acting up in class, and I don't have a good phone number. Can you help me find a good phone number? No response.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So it's like not
No
really.
response.
So
So I'm not getting any backup.
tell me how you're getting better.
But it's like you're still gonna continue doing your work.
I was so bringing it to
The only thing I do get help with
How are
is
you
if I call
improving
security.
I'm developing my repertoire
Getting with the
for
security.
my
I have my back.
I am
I had a bad day on Friday.
yeah.
And these kids
So that's
are
what
in
you're
the
trying
gym, talking to another teacher,
And these things are really that.
and
Okay,
these
I'll.
kids were kicking the door. Freaking kicking the door, like they were kicking it.
I'll improve my classroom standards and more.
I was like, nope.
Why
I'm
did
doing
you
nothing for something.
And that's it. So that's what you're talking about. I will develop learning too. So I will
All the time.
When out there in San Antonio,
I will
and
enhance
security,
that.
I didn't even have to call them.
Too, it's like,
I also think that
you get
you're
that
gonna
like
need
mob
more,
mentality. There's everything, they just know.
And if they're with their friends, they have more courage.
two
Because that's how my grades
So you have one and two.
They feed off of each
We
other.
help each other, and if I need to beat two of them out, but now that matters.
Right? You need more.
I have all courage.
You said in rubric that it is
And then the one, the one that ditches every day, the one that ditches every day,
You can
the
define
boy that ditches
multiple
every day in another class. And I keep telling him, you need to go to your class. You need to go to your class. I don't have to do anything.
That's a great place for
Nothing
your update.
happens. I sent her a referral. They told me she was supposed to be
Yeah, it's
in
in
detention today. She wasn't in detention today. She was still out there.
Huh?
So I wrote another referral today. Oh, she's gonna be in detention. Well, we'll see. You didn't even make her stay in detention. No. So there's no consequence.
You still have 4 minutes.
During my class, that
Oh.
they are telling that they're gonna
Well, how come I
All
stop?
day.
Come on, people.
It's supposed to be all day, like an in-school
So I
suspension
still
type
have
thing.
not gotten any.
She was supposed to be in detention. At least I think. I don't know. I thought detention was all day.
from my ex and yours in my class.
Oh, she wasn't in detention during my class, because she was in there today. She didn't come to roll call. She refuses to stand in roll call line. She refuses to dress out. And then she'll just take off and go wherever. And I don't see her again. And then in the class, it's like, oh, there she is again.
Now I want you to tell me
What am
more.
I supposed to do? I have 50, 60 other kids. I can't go chasing her down.
That,
What am I supposed to do?
so you're
I don't know what to do.
observing other
Just
teachers,
like,
talking to your
I'm a new
peers,
teacher. I'm a brand new teacher. I don't know what to do.
feedback from your mentor, you're researching on the web.
The other day, she said
Analyze
that
all
she did come
of
into the
all that
gym, all in the gym, and she came in at about 5
That
girls
shows
right
us
out the
that you're
gym
researching.
while I was being observed by Dave's.
That's the idea, is you're looking for, well, how do I get better? I said, this is how I'm gonna get better. If you already know how to
Right out the
do,
gym.
then why are we
I call them, but
doing
hey,
this?
what are you guys doing?
Now
Get
let's
back
go
in
through an
here.
exercise.
Two of them
But if you
came
say,
back.
this is
No,
what
I
I
was
do.
going to the bathroom.
I don't
No,
want to do it.
you weren't going to the
Look at all
bathroom.
these
You were running
ideas.
from me. You
Yeah.
were trying to
Some of them I'll
hide.
use if I
And you didn't have permission to go to the
research the
bathroom.
web, I'm gonna go to what I.
This is just like any kind of
Classroom
class. You
management
can't just get up and walk out.
right? Throw that in there.
Two of them came back. The one girl that never comes to class, the one I have trouble with that came for her, she
All right, is that it? Timer done?
didn't come back. So I had to write a referral on her and call security.
You're supposed to delete it. Oh, I think I had it.
I don't know what else to do.
A lot of these things are taken implemented, but you just don't have the environment for them.
Right.
It's like usually you focus on
Yeah.
and then
And honestly, when we're doing activities, if they
Okay.
don't want to do anything,
Let's talk about two things real quick on page 35 in your packet. In your table groups, I want you to discuss the difference between a low level or minor event and a high level or major event. In other words, what can you deal with in class and what are you going to automatically send to the office? So page 30, what is it, 35? Tell me what a low level or minor offense is in your table groups and or a high level and major event. One in which you deal with in your class and one in which you know immediately you need to call the principal. Talk about that in your table.
tell me what you want. I don't care. I made the point where I'm not even gonna argue with you. Yeah. And there's no consequence.
It's not creating a disturbance, it's not
Basically giving up on. Some pretty bad instances in class.
I sent one out, but I didn't even bother writing it, and I didn't get anything from admin asking for one, so I doubt they actually went to
Detention. I got the email saying she got detention, but she wasn't in detention because she was out there.
Well, I think they do it. I think they schedule it for like an upcoming date.
Yeah, I know. I wrote her up on Friday. She was not being detention. She was there, messing around. And then the other class was wandering all over the place.
Other times, like they'll try to another class, so then still come to my side, they'll say no, you need to send it to my side.
This is what Carrie told me. The main girl that was having trouble with someone. And they know that I'm having trouble with someone. She's going to have our school on examination. So paper, like this paper. Keep writing out, keep writing out, keep writing out.
How many times have you read it until they actually say
As long as she's not doing what she's supposed to do, and she's not in my class, I write her up every day. She refuses to dress out, she refuses to come to class, she refuses to stand in her and she's dragging other kids down with her. She disrupts the class. Disrupting the class. And I think that's the difference between the low and the high. Like you said, phones, I'll take phones away. Sometimes I say, no, I'm not taking my phone. Okay, well then I'm gonna take it and it's gonna go to administration and your parents can come pick it up. And then they're like, okay, can I get, as long as because they think they can get back after class, they'll most of the time, you might have to talk them into it, but they'll give you the phone. Like, give me your phone, you're taking your phone, and I'll have a pocket with my phone sometimes. My caps are falling off. Right? My caps are falling off because I have 10 pockets, 10 phones in my pocket. So that's, to me, that's low level. Unless you're being defined, you won't give me your phone. To me, that's low level. High level is more not going to class, ditching, running out of class, to go to class. And like today, someone comes to work. Today she came to work for the first time. She came to both roles. She never misses out every day of her life, just to herself. She came to roll. Came to roll second time. I think she works in the gym. She's like, oh, so I had to write her. I have to. Otherwise, I'm like, what if you have? She's supposed to be in her class. But I can't write her immediately. Like, I have to write her back to the office. And I haven't had anybody up until Friday. Other than fights, I had a fight.
Yeah, this is the plan.
And you throw yourself in there and just break it up, or no?
No. I mean, are we required to?
No. We don't have to if we don't want to.
What are some major things you came up with? No question, you're getting sent to the office right now.
Oh, was that
Are we, if there's a fight, are we required to intervene?
What do you say, class?
No.
You mean physically intervene?
Physically intervene?
No.
Not allowed to.
You just kind of tell everybody else to get back.
Partly because you could hurt somebody or get hurt yourself.
Okay, I just wanted to be 100% clear on that.
If you put a hand on a student, you're looking at
I just wanted to
liability.
be clear. If they're fighting and I'm like, well, how come they're
But-
fighting?
But a loud voice or a
I'm not
whistle,
getting
right, often
Yeah.
can make things stop. But the high school level, you get security. But you're too small to get in the middle of that.
Yeah, that's what I told them.
Sometimes it's
So
just
you
so
better fight
loud.
outside because all I'm doing is calling security.
And here, meanwhile, these girls are beating the crap out of each other.
Get the hose on them.
Okay.
Get the dog.
So fighting is one, fighting, no question, they're gone. What else?
For high level,
Yep, they're gone, no matter what.
fighting or drugs.
Fighting or drugs. Good, keep going on that list of drugs. What would
Smoking
you-
weed in the bathroom.
So any illegal drugs,
Passing out on the floor saying they can't move because their body's numb.
Is that from the drugs or just because, like,
Probably
okay,
some
so what other things are classified as drugs that we don't even think about?
what are they, the jewels or whatever, the vape?
the vape pens.
Okay, vaping.
Why
Good,
are they
what
gonna
else?
do that?
What, and along the vaping path
But
is,
they're eating brownies and cookies with it in there too now.
okay,
Cigarettes?
so you got tobacco,
Tobacco.
okay, and it's hard to detect, right? If you're looking at pot with, it's got drugs in it, but there is a school rule that you can't bring and pass out food. You can only eat it right? You can't share your brownies with somebody else. We can't even do it as fundraisers anymore. It has to be in a what? Pre-packaged. Okay. What about Advil?
They can't take Advil or we can't hand out Advil?
Yes, that's correct.
Both?
They're not allowed to have it, and you're not allowed to give it.
I would never give them anything.
No, I wouldn't give them anything, but I was like, I was questioning that.
We used to get back when we had drug dogs, they would sniff out Advil and cold medicine in the cars. I'm like, I know you can't keep your
And
cold
alcohol.
medicine.
But what if you're a girl? Like, I feel like you have to go down to the office and be
nurse
like,
to go
I'm on
get-
my, cover your ears,
Yeah.
I'm on my period.
Sometimes you don't see the drugs, but you can tell they're intoxicated or they're high.
Suspicion of drug use would require you to call.
I never know.
The
You never know.
I never know.
the idea of
I used, if
If
there's
they're
tired,
talking, no.
medication on campus is to be kept in the nurse's office with a parent or doctor's note. Period.
Except for inhalers.
And
But they have to have the order, they have to have an order, it can't just be because their parents want them to bring their inhaler.
True. Yeah, you have to have a doctor's note.
Doctor's
It still
orders,
needs to be
doctor's
on
note to
file.
have, yeah.
okay, what else? Weapons? You okay with that?
No.
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 Weapons would get you sent to the office immediately. What else?
Inappropriate touching.
Inappropriate touching, groping, fondling, that sort of thing. Okay.
Cursing at the teacher, like calling them
Oh, I'm
like,
the teacher? Okay.
Oh, that's kind of a low level for me.
like calling you
Like,
All right, wait, we'll come back to that. Hold on to that one for just a second. I want to finish the major list though, but that's a gray area. We'll see. What about something that would start a fire with?
The lighter?
A lighter, matches, even flint and steel.
They don't have that.
My Boy Scouts do. What about fireworks, firecrackers, or explosives?
we've had that.
Yeah, no explosives allowed.
So what's the common sense line here? If it could do what? Harm themselves or harm somebody else, right? If I swallow a whole bottle of somebody's Advil, I could hurt myself, right? All right. I probably would vomit first, but okay. All right. Now the question becomes, what if I'm insulting somebody else? All right. So the student swears and cusses out the teacher. Is that a gray area, a black and white area, a keep them in class or send them out issue?
I've had it happen to me before, and I haven't sent them out.
I like nipping it in the butt so it doesn't happen again.
Okay, but does it require sending them out of class in order to do that?
That already happened to
Don't
me
come
in
and beg for your grade.
How what grade?
sophomores.
Sophomores?
I asked I asked a general question to the class, and I had a student like yell out, "That's a dumbass question." So I thought that was.
So in that case, what does the book
It was
we
like
passed
that,
out suggest we use instead? A D, what do they call it? A diffuser. That may be, but you need to answer it anyway, and you're going to answer it today, right? You put them on the spot.
With the girl,
That's your opinion.
it's hard because the intent isn't negative, but the word is inappropriate. Like the girls are constantly calling each other bitch.
Yes.
So it's like, it's a gray, like I don't want them to say it, I'm constantly calling them out on it, but am I going to write them up? Then I'd be writing 30 people up every single day.
So there is an expectation that at grandma's house I don't swear, but it's okay.
No,
if I
they
swear
don't
at
care. They
no,
have in front of my mom,
point
grandma.
is, grandma says you never swear in this house, and we go to grandma's house, we never swear, right? But when we're at a friend's house, oh, we swear all we want. Do you have to set the expectation in your room? Oh, heck no, we don't use that kind of language in this classroom.
I mean, they're always like, or like, I'm sorry, or I won't say it again, but then,
I told you the
The
story
next
of
day.
watching preschool, my wife, and the dirty underwear.
yeah.
It's a common language now that I didn't grow up with. It was dirty language was, just the boys in the garage kind of thing. It wasn't an everyday, and now it is. And I have, if you know my background, I go to church, and it's a pretty important thing. In fact, that's why one of these I got to go to another meeting tonight. One of my closest friends, though, he doesn't have any problem with swearing. And, well, a couple years ago, we went up to the Trinity River to go fly fishing, and we hired a guy who loved the F word. And even my friend who uses it liberally said that was too much. It's like a guy that likes salt. Well, that's too much salt. And we won't hire that guy again. I mean, I'm not kidding. It was probably used 13, 14, 15 times in one sentence.
Oh, wow.
I mean, all day long. My ears are bleeding.
I tell my girls too that, hey, that's not very ladylike. I don't want to hear that in my classroom.
Right.
You can't talk like that in my class.
And
I don't
it
allow
sets the
it.
expectation,
Yeah.
and they figure it out.
And every now and then they do slip or they say something. They've called me names, but just today, oh my effing God, because they had to do another exercise on top of it, and that was, they didn't want to do another one. So
Oh my god, isn't enough. Oh my god, you have to act.
yeah, you had to have that F word.
I used to say that.
And I don't like that word. I just, hey, what did you say? Did I catch you say? And I make them, I kind of embarrass them and put them on the spot, like when they say bad words. Cause
I agree. And we have, oh my God, Mr. D, oh my goodness. Wow, it is so good to hear you praying, but please understand, I am not God.
Very close.
They're like, I'm not gonna use that again.
Because you have to let them know it is bad, otherwise they don't know.
That's the high expectation we've been talking about every session. Okay, turn the page. There is a secondary form. Turn the page. There is an elementary form and a kindergarten first grade form. Find the one that's appropriate to you. And I want you to compare it to either the one that your site is using or how would you modify it. Okay? So when we look at the I was, it's explaining that it's asking what the student was doing that was inappropriate. Students should be answering in complete sentences. Okay? Just saying talking or acting like a goofball, that's not going to work. I wanted, this portion of the form is wanting the student to think about why they were behaving this way. Okay? Why was I doing this? Okay? I wanted.
Why would you ask what did I want?
In other words, what did your behavior, what were you trying to do with your behavior?
What was their motive?
I was trying to make
What
class
was the purpose
laugh,
of
I
your
was trying to get out.
Are they going to get that out of what did I want?
No, that's why we're asking you to modify. If you make this your own, and if you don't like that, throw it out. Right? My teacher probably felt this portion of the form is asking the students to understand what you are feeling by their behavior, and then my classroom mates probably felt this portion of the form is asking the student to understand what the classmates are feeling by their behavior. This is getting more into I totally have the words in my head and I can't say them. Restorative justice, right? Asking how it's affecting your fellow students. What problems did my behavior create? Students expect to reflect on their destructive behavior, and then in the future, I will. The student's asking the student to develop a plan to correct the behavior. Again, we're a little more restorative justice. Right? And then Jenny wrote a quote that best relates to this incident. And on her form, if you turned it over, you would find all the quotes, or it could be posted on the wall. So they quote it, and then they tell why it relates to their situation. I am ready to turn to class, yes or no, and the teacher notes at the end of class, take time to record your notes on this incident. So look at the form, what do you like and not like, and talk about it in your table groups.
I need to order to my kids because candy is
With Diane's candy.
I don't want to be here. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to do things like I didn't want to do PE. I didn't yeah.
So this table over here says we want to see sentence frames because their students are not creative enough to do this on their own. All right, so that's an idea.
We have this.
You know what? I've heard that the kids, when they have a long extended period where they're going to be at home, a lot of times they start acting up because they really don't want to be at home.
She's on there.
What was that? Oh, thanks.
I'd be surprised at how many kids hang out in the locker rooms after school because they don't want to go home. It's bad.
I was thinking to, what was my
What would
motive?
be cool is if there was like a college student you would pay, or like you would have it where the gym is open. Of course, you have sports, so that is a part of it. Like Planet Fitness, but your kids can come and work out, do what they want.
Do you know like ASP system, if you get like it's usually sorry, but they have females who do it where that would be their thing, like fitness training or this or that, but I don't know if we have that, you know. But with the
You have the
ASP,
capacity because you're using the gym.
We're always using the gyms are
it
constantly.
doesn't have to be like it could be like
Shoot some free weights. Just have it out
Even
the
the
bar.
weight classes are taken, even the ones, and all the things are always facilities are constantly packed. And as a matter of fact, we're getting ready to lose some stuff because we're getting ready to do the track.
Even having like
Starting on on the 15th of this month. So we will not have a track, we will not have a football field, we will not have all around it.
Doing the track?
Yeah, we're getting a new track.
As track season is starting again.
Yeah.
You can go to the closest.
I couldn't wait till June.
Should be ready by next week.
But I think that, to be more.
If rain allows.
Having the desk, having the desk.
Smiley face guy.
But I like the idea of probably.
Yeah, because they want to do our freshman football games there, and if it allows, where they can get it up, yeah, our freshman football team will have our games there once it gets completed, because we'll have a new football field. I think it's gonna be as nice kind of a field as Arrowhead. Not maybe the stadium. I mean, we're getting a stadium, but not quite as big. We're getting an all-weather track, and they're getting new turf. And then she said if we can get enough bleachers on the visitor side, we might have all of our football games there. But that depends on if we can get enough bleachers for the visitors. We're not worried about our side, they're worried about the visitor side. But freshman games will be there.
Have a good name, talk about it. Everybody not happy. I don't know.